All right, we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Fugue Office Hours, where we are putting engineers in command of cloud security and compliance. Excited today to have our first guest on an Office Hours episode is Dave Williams from New Light Technologies. I will let him introduce himself a little bit more here in a second, but we had Dave join us a few weeks ago for a cloud security masterclass on bringing your cloud environment into compliance and proving it. It's a really interesting and highly actionable masterclass for anybody that's managing cloud infrastructure and is responsible for the security and compliance of that infrastructure, which is pretty much anybody managing cloud infrastructure. So go check that out. You can find that episode as well as our other cloud security masterclasses at fugue.co/masterclass. Also on this office hours, we have Ricardo Green, solutions architect here at Fugue, as well as my co-founder and CTO at Fugue, Josh Stella, who was also a big part of that masterclass and all of the masterclasses we do. But the reason we're here today is to have Dave Williams on to talk about the work he does and how Fugue helps him do that. So Dave, welcome.
Thank you. And we just ran out Josh's buddy there. He just left.
That is the Fugue mascot. Hey, Sherlock. Appropriately named Sherlock. We find cloud security issues. Come here, dude. Say hi to the people. Yeah, it's near dinner time, so he's going to be wandering out to pester my better half here.
Or operating as a dog.
Great Dane.
Yeah, he's a man-sized dog. But yeah, very, very good-natured fellow. Likes to stick his head out the window and watch everyone go down the street. Very nosy guy. So highly appropriate to Fugue.
Yeah, he's awesome. So Dave, again, thanks for joining us. And it'd be great, I think, to just have you let everybody know a little bit about New Light Technologies, NLT, and the work that you guys do, and then what you're doing at NLT day in and day out.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So New Light, we're a small consulting firm out of DC, primarily serving the DC area, although we have customers really across the country. We have sort of a pedigree in GIS and geospatial work, intelligence, GeoInt, if those terms mean anything. But that, and my background as well, and I think Josh too, maybe. I have a geography and an IT undergrad and started in IT or GIS, but we also have a quickly growing cloud practice, DevOps cloud type of work. And so my role at NLT is cloud architect, work with a variety of federal, state, and local and commercial customers, which is nice, primarily across AWS and Azure. So there's a nice mix of both sizes, verticals, technology. My sort of both interest and where I end up doing a bit of work is on security, automation, a lot of like infrastructure as code, getting customers compliant, putting in practices so that what they deploy remains compliant. And that's, a couple of years ago, what led me to learning about Fugue. And here we are.
So Dave, I have a huge question. So a lot of these office hour sessions are kind of me showing different examples of different things that you can do with Fugue, different use cases, those sorts of things. I have them more or less set up in my demo environments, and a lot of the information and details I get are from folks like you. So you guys tell me, what you're doing, what you're using it for. So I think it would actually be really good if you could we kind of titled this session this way, like a day in the life. So how are you interacting with Fugue on a daily basis and some of the things that you're doing? Because I think this gives a lot of perspective to those engineers and other architects that are either on the fringe, haven't started using Fugue, or even thinking about it. So what are you doing with Fugue? Talk me through that.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about it. There's probably sort of like three common ways that I am usually interacting with the Fugue system or product or service. So the first is more in sort of fits and starts, where I have a customer who says, hey, I've got this AWS environment usually, and we have to get HIPAA compliant, we have to get SOC compliant, and that that usually means a bunch of technical remediation work, kind of what we talked about in the last master class. And what we use Fugue for is we scan the environment. It tells us what they are, and in this case, more importantly, what they are not compliant with, and use that as a sort of a backlog of work we have to do. So, for example, you've got port 80 open to the world, got to go close that. You don't have encrypted S3 buckets, need to change that. So, and that's the kind of thing where it may be several works of very focused daily. We're in the Fugue.co UI a lot, but then. I may go a couple weeks without going back and logging in, because so once a system is up and running, and we have this for the accounts that we manage, the cloud accounts, and for some customers, is throughout the day, I get a daily log of changes to every customer account, and in the Fugue world that's called like drift, right? So changes from a baseline.
Yeah.
So once an environment is set up and gold standard, right, or clean or perfect. But what's really nice is we're a small team, and we have a variety of customers. And I'm usually on project work, so my focus kind of is I go deep in one area. But for any account, Azure account or Azure subscription, AWS account, I get a daily email if there's drift, right? And what's nice is I don't have to go log in to the Fugue website. So I don't have to like open a browser. Remember to do that. And I get an email, and depending upon some rules we have set up, depending upon the account, the customer, and so forth, if a drift event occurs and that email is sent, it triggers a ticket in our ticketing system. We use something called Freshdesk, and then that opens a ticket. And depending again upon some rules we've set up, it assigns it to an engineer like me or someone else to go run down. A lot of cases that just means say, okay, I'm aware of it, to make sure eyes have put on it. Some cases that means go back and change something because someone opened up something or made a configuration change. So that's nice because, in that scenario, I'm able to leverage what you guys do, but not have to like just go use the Fugue UI, right? The system is coming to me. I'm always in email. I may not remember every day to have to go open a website. And then the last thing, I know I'm kind of rambly, I'll be quick here. This was actually happened an hour and a half ago with a customer, a very big customer with a very, very large environment. We're using the visualizer tool to go in, and literally the guy I was working with goes, oh, wow, there's a bunch of stuff there that I didn't know. We can go clean that up. So it's sort of like, consulting with folks, working through, and with them, it's sort of not even security related, it's something else, but just being able to use the tools, the reporting tools and the visualization tools to get a read on what's there and to help us clean stuff up.
I'm going to chime in on that a little bit on two fronts. One is if they had stuff they didn't know about, that's a huge security issue. So many breaches occur because people forget about infrastructure, and it gets forgotten about and goes unnoticed and is unmaintained, and that provides hackers a foot in the door. So that like total knowledge of the environment is really important. And I suspect, Dave, that when Drew and I founded Fugue, one of the first things we started working on was the visualizer, and the reason is twofold. One, I can't look at a giant spreadsheet or tabular form of data with a manifest of all my infrastructure and make sense of it. I have to see it mapped out, and I think most people do, to know what's really out there. And then two is I just got really sick of doing Visio when I was at AWS and having it be always out of date, and so I'm glad you're getting use out of it. That warms my cold heart.
Yeah, this particular customer, we're doing some work with them. I'm being vague on purpose, just out of sensitivity. We're doing some work with them, and the requirement is we provide a variety of drawings of their environment, and like that's it. To do that by hand is it's not worth trying. So the problem then is like I mean, it would literally take weeks of work, and of course, it's out of date. So being able to, yeah, you're gonna pull it up.
Yeah, I'm going to show just an example of what you're talking about.
So having that tool where it's accurate because it's being rendered based upon the actual state of the environment, and it's actually aesthetically pleasing and useful, right? I mean, that's the magic. That's the magic sweet spot. So yeah, this is what I'm talking about and what we're finding in this case, and what we found in some other cases, is for different accreditation or authorizations or compliance work, we're able to ship these drawings out as usable artifacts. Literally saving dozens or hundreds of hours of work from trying to draw this by hand. And then the problem by hand, as I alluded to or said, is even if you're able to do this, you can make it pretty, it's out of date. And I've been through some real world experiences where customers have had drawings that represented certain security configurations that were patently wrong and led to issues. So that time waste or that time sink combined with the fact that a human doing it means it's going to be fallible is something I think is noble of what you're doing here with the visualizer tool.
Well, that's awesome to hear. And I think that I'm glad you're not naming names. We all have customer relationships, and by the way, that scenario of like unknown infrastructure is one common and two ongoing in any scale cloud accounts. Like anyone who's watching this, you probably have stuff you're not aware of. And if you don't now, you will probably end up having stuff you're not aware of at some point, because one of the beautiful things about cloud is I can go build a global network by running a script in 10 minutes. To do that in the past, we had to, get a change control board together, go through procurement. I mean, it would take months to even build a local network, much less a global network. It can be done in like 5 minutes on the cloud. And so people are going to do that, right? They're going to do it. And maybe not a global network, but they're going to build stuff. And you might lose track of some of it. And that's kind of a fundamental problem, because both the good guys and the bad guys, step number one is discovery, is finding stuff. And so it's really thrilling to me to hear that the visualizer helps discover, because that's a big part of the intent.
So can I plug a feature really quickly? I know this isn't sales time, but I'm going to plug a feature. So one of the aspects I think, and I've done this, I'm sure others have, is even when you're just kind of, playing around, deploying, trying out different things, you deploy things into large accounts. Let me get to the right screen and you don't know exactly where you deployed it. So I had this conversation, and I have the benefit of talking to our customers pretty much every day. But one of the features that I really found valuable is you deploy an instance, and for some reason you can't find it. This search feature, so like I can type in here Fugue demo, and so everything that says Fugue demo associated with it comes up, and I can click into it, and I can go directly to that instance, and then just have all the attributes and configuration details of that. We talk about time saving. I know, Dave, you just said you spend 40, 60 hours a quarter working on these drawings for customers. I just find that's really valuable. I can get to this specific instance. I can pan out. I can see which VPC it's in, which region, all that sort of good stuff. So I just wanted to plug that, because that's something that I think we added this search functionality to the visualizer a few months ago, and it's become just a huge benefit to a lot of customers in helping them find things. And you can imagine an environment that has thousands of resources and you're trying to pinpoint an instance, those sorts of things. Just having little things like a search feature are really huge in helping folks pinpoint where there may be issues or looking for something that they don't know is there or not. So I just wanted to plug that in there.
Yeah, Ricardo. Well, Dave, you mentioned earlier a lot of your work is GIS and focused on NatSec and similar spaces, and mentioned I might have a little background there. I do, and I've always been a huge fan of GIS, and a lot of our visualization is based on the idea of essentially creating a GIS for your cloud infrastructure, giving you a reasonable map. So as you zoom in, you get more details, just like in Google Maps. You can do searches for locations, and we're adding features all the time, and that ability to select an object and get all the details on that object and to do it all interactively. So proud of the engineering team, and that all this stuff is written against GPU. So that's why the frame rate's good, et cetera, et cetera. So we've put a lot of effort into it, but it's very much a GIS idea mapped over to cloud topology.
So Dave, another aspect of your day-to-day that I wanted to ask: do your customers come to you and say, we've got this environment, can you help us secure it? I mean, is that an element of what you do? I just find so many of our customers, like when we one of the questions we always ask is, what are you currently doing for security? And they may say, we've got a couple of checks that we do here and there, or we're trying to work with some config rules. I really want to understand like the ease of use. So when you were first introduced to Fugue, you're hooking it up into a customer's accounts, security focused. What's that process like for you? Are we talking days, weeks, getting things? I know what I tell customers. I want to hear it from you. So how long does it take you? You have a new customer says, hey, tell us how secure we are. How long is it going to take you response-wise? And if any of your customers are watching, I don't want them to think that you're overcharging them, but let's hear about it.
Yeah, well, your initial question was, do folks come and ask, hey, can you help us secure an environment? That's a fundamental part, if not the majority of what, well, it's a good chunk of what we do. So yes, that definitely happens. And, that I think this was a topic we talked about on the masterclass. That can be intimidating, right? It's like, all right, well, you've got to be PCI compliant. What do you do? Like, that's kind of scary to me anyway, or at least it used to be. It still is in some way. It depends on who we're working with. Or you have to go get an ATO for a system, right? Because you're FISMA compliant, you're a federal agency. That's a big process. And, people want to get through it. And they also, most people, the good people, actually want their systems to be safer. And so it becomes more than a documentation exercise. You want to provide real value. And, to get to the second, your follow-on questions, one of the things I struggle with, and I think we chatted about this earlier this week, is just staying hip to all the technologies out there, especially, between project work and trying to stay current on, I work across AWS and Azure. One is enough. Two, it's always you're always behind trying to keep current. And part of that process is the continual evaluation of new tools. Like, we've got a customer where literally our project is just demoing technology, so that he's a executive at a big place, just is, hey, what's Stack Rocks? I've heard about it. Go tell me what it does. And what is, I promise I would say this if you guys weren't here. So what's great about Fugue is, I can go create an account for free, and within literally 10 minutes, and most of that time is just a scan time, I can have a report telling me my Azure, AWS, my cloud environment, how in or out of compliant I am with 7 or 8 families, NIST, GDPR, SOC, PCI, etc. So the barrier to entry to quickly see the value there compared to many other tools, some of which would be just tools in the cloud space. Like, if I were building a product, what I would not do is not have self-service. There are 2 tools. I gave you this analogy. I won't use names. There's 2 tools in the sort of cloud management space, right? Not few competitors, but in the general. One allows me to create a demo for 14 days and use it and see it. And the other, I had to write an email, a salesperson called me, ended up 3 phone calls. Guess which one I ended up buying? I was the former, right? I think most techies are sort of autodidacts and like to learn on their own. And my day is usually swamped with just meetings. So the point is that getting a new environment added, I did one today. it took less than 5 minutes to add a new Azure subscription, and another 10. This happened to be a monster subscription. It was less than 10 minutes for the scan to run. So within 15 minutes, I'm showing a customer the visualizer. I'm showing them how interactive compliant they are with security families. So the ability to show the value and get the things that help me, like if tools help me with my time and help get customers more secure, we buy them. And the thing is, I think in the industry, people are happy to pay for these sort of services. They just have to learn about them, right?
Yeah.
Man, that thrills me, because a lot of our philosophy has been to put tools in the hands of engineers. And me personally, when I was on the other side of the table, like buying tools or selecting tools, I just want to pick something up and try it out. A lot of the value of a tool to me is wrapped up in how much I can do on my own without having to ask for help.
Yeah.
When I was procuring software, one of the questions I would ask if it wasn't broken out in a public company is, what percentage of your revenues are ProServe or professional services? And if it was high, I wasn't real interested, because I want to do it myself. And so, at Fugue, I think the first 2 employees outside of the founders were a writer for documentation. So we take docs real seriously, because we expect people are like us and maybe don't want to talk to us until they want to talk to us, which is cool. And a designer to start work on the viz. But that's great to hear that it is that easy to use.
Yeah. So for folks who haven't used Fugue or are just kind of investigating, we absolutely encourage our docs. So it's here, docs.fugue.co. This getting started section literally walks you through it. And I love it. It's like get started in 5 minutes, because I've been promising 15. So I've been under promising and over delivering. But literally it's really that quick. So we actually have it laid out. So step by step, for those enterprise folk that have large environments and need to automate, reach out. We will definitely walk you through that. We've created a lot of tools outside of our Fugue, or that work with Fugue, that we've put in our open GitHub repository to check out. But certainly take the time to review the docs. We literally have gotten customers that have said, we're talking to you because it's taken us months, even close to a year, to get started and implement other tools in their environments.
Hey, Ricardo, can I make a
trial period? They were blown away.
Sorry, I'm stepping over you.
No,
I just was thinking, I don't want to lose the thought, because it's something I don't think I've heard said. And one of the things that is very nice about the Fugue learning it, and I say this after having recently had some opposite experiences, is I can demo and you guys don't deploy any infrastructure. That is huge. So for example, if I'm demoing like some tool that helps me with my cloud environment, and I actually want to see a real account, not just some empty sandbox, right? A lot of SaaS products, even they call them SaaS, a lot of products in the market, they're going to stick some lambdas, they're going to stick some storage, right? So the fact that I can take Fugue and say, just give me a read-only role, that makes it a lot more palatable to people to actually show real value against a real environment. I know that's kind of a nuanced point, but it's come up lately, and it's a big point.
No, we don't want to add your AWS bill. Right?
Well, yeah, I think that's actually I was thinking about that in one case. I think that's why this one company was doing that, is they don't want to run some of that logic inside their environment. But
yeah, we spent a whole lot of time making our platform super efficient, so that we could make that barrier to entry so low, so that because when I was a programmer for decades, I didn't have like budget approval usually until I became a manager and an executive, and we're trying to help the engineers as much as we're trying to help the executives. So we want folks to be able to go do stuff, get proficient without having to ask Mother May I for any budget approval at all. And if you go to fugue.co, you can do that today. In fact, we have a developer edition that has a somewhat limited set of compliance families CIS and Fugue best practices. And Fugue best practices is something I'm really proud of, because what we're doing there is we're actually analyzing real world breaches in the cloud and figuring out if the hackers exploited things that are not covered in things like CIS, and it turns out they are. And so we put those in Fugue best practices. Well, the developer edition is free forever, up to a limited scale, I think 1,500 cloud resources, which is actually a pretty good number of cloud resources. So.
Yeah, and I would imagine, there's a big difference between read-only IAM role, and you can view that role, versus I need to deploy some infrastructure in my cloud environment in order to be able to use this tool. So there's a pretty big amount of daylight between those two things to get approved. I had a question for you, Dave, about the viz, because I am super interested in kind of that initial, impact, or that initial value when you're pointing Fugue at a new to you cloud environment. What are the kinds of things when you kind of get that initial visualization? Either are you maybe looking at or looking for, or maybe some of the types of things that have kind of jumped out from a visual standpoint? Because I don't think, a lot of people out there, like you said, are spending a ton of time manually diagramming cloud infrastructure, which is not only suboptimal because it takes a long time, but it probably doesn't reflect the truth of what's running. What are the kinds of things that you found helpful with just that initial visualization?
Yeah, I think the very first thought is to get a quick read on the core resources that exist. So like, are there VMs or not? And just knowing that because a lot of environments now, we're not running VMs anymore. So knowing whether there's virtual machines out there is important. But okay, are there Lambda? Like we have accounts where it's literally S3 and CloudFront. I mean, there's no traditional infrastructure. So just getting kind of a read on, like, kind of a mental inventory of sort of what's the broad scope of the type of resources in here. And then I think the thing I'm always kind of thinking about is network connectivity, because that's how people get in and can do bad things. So, where are the VPC or VNet or, VLAN as an old term, integrations? Where are the pinch points that I need to be thinking about when it comes to traffic flow? Where are the API gateways? Where are the CDN or CloudFront distros? Where are the load balancers? Because that's where I'm going to be thinking about where I need, like flow logs, access logs, WAF rules. If you don't have it, are you running a WAF? You may not be. So I'm kind of always fundamentally, I'm always thinking about the connectivity between things. And then I think what's good to do is I try and keep a mental picture of like the count of things. Like, oh, you have 72 app services. Did you know you had that many? You have 99 S3 buckets, which means you've hit the soft limit. You probably don't need that many. Let's talk about why you have so many. So that's kind of, that's kind of the first thing I'm thinking about: the scope, the mixture of resources, always the networking, and always kind of thinking about how to protect the ingress of traffic, the connectivity, and then some sort of like sizing scope. So.
And so, without Fugue, I assume essentially when you would engage with a new customer or approach a new environment that you're tasked with kind of understanding and ultimately helping secure, that priority list hasn't changed. Before Fugue, you would still want to know, like, what are we dealing with here? Are there VMs? What does the connectivity look like? Do they have a lot of something running that might indicate, some decision making went awry at some point? But you didn't have the visualization tool to kind of like leapfrog a lot of the process of getting to those answers.
Yeah, well, that's where you're going with that's a good way. I see where you're going with your question. That's a good setup. So yeah, I mean, if you don't have that, the way that we do this is if you're in AWS, like, most people don't use tags as well as they should. So they probably aren't using in AWS what are called resource groups, which are sort of tag containers. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I mean, let's assume you don't have like CloudFormation stacks, so you can't visualize them. It's pretty tough. I think there's some visualization tools that I've come across, but I can't recall. It's definitely not holistic. It's a lot of hunting and pecking. And one thing I've gotten burned on pretty bad is thinking I understand the state of an AWS account and just forgetting to click and switch to the Ohio region. So I'm looking at one region and I'm like, oh man, I missed this. So I mean, it is. I'm sure there are tools out there, or there are scripts we could write that would inventory things, but it's it's tough that way. I mean, in Azure we have resource groups, so we can always kind of start with some container and then drill down. But below the resource group, it's usually it can be as disorganized. When I'm coming into an environment, right, what I always start with, after kind of like hunting and pecking, I always look at the bill. And to me, and one of the things that we found, and just to toot our horn a little bit, is we're good at saving people money. Like, we're really good at that. And it's not rocket science. It's usually looking at things and going, you're paying $20K for SQL Server and it's running at 0.01% CPU average. Let's trim that down. But when assessing an account kind of in the blue, I usually start at the bill, because it kind of gives me, because it's where people are spending money, right? So if there's 600 things, including every little IP and elastic network interface, the things that I'm probably, well, I shouldn't say this, the things that at least cost the most are up front. But of course, the problem with this approach is that little network interface at the fifth page of your tab could be a vulnerability because it's got a security group that's open. But without the visualizer capability, I'm usually, it's a lot of hunting and pecking, and the best way I kind of organize the approach is the cost of things, but that's usually tied to there's a reason for that, as I'm saying. I'm getting rambly now, so I'll pause.
What I just hearing you talk about, one of the things that I was thinking about, just when you're doing things in the console, it is that regional approach. You kind of do switch regions, so you're not getting that whole account view. So you go through each region individually, look at all the EC2 instances, and you want to see the CLI as well. So I think, Drew, and that actually makes a good point, being able to look at the whole region, just get a picture of it, and you can kind of start there and say, okay, this is our starting point, this is what's out there, and then you can kind of get to work from there.
Yeah, just to piggyback a little bit as like an aside / pro tip. We just did a masterclass on thinking like a hacker, so this is fresh in my head. If you're looking at the bill and you see GPU instances, but you're not running business apps that want GPUs, you should look real hard, because a very common exploit is crypto mining. If somebody gets access to your account, and there are some GPU instances that, if you have a large AWS bill, it might seem like a little variance, but are very expensive, and they might be mining Bitcoin or Dogecoin or whatever.
And is that also true on my laptop at home? I noticed some websites I go to kill my GPU, and it's like text.
I don't think your laptop GPU is probably big enough to matter too much. Some of these AWS, I mean, like, look, serious crypto miners are buying stacks of custom ASIC boxes, right? Like, actually, etched chips that are designed for mining. But if a bad guy gets into your AWS account and they have the ability to spawn EC2, a very typical thing for them to do is launch as much as they think they can get away with for these high-dollar GPUs and get as much mining done as possible. So, and very few, I won't say very few, but it's kind of uncommon to need GPU instances for regular business apps. Maybe in GIS you guys are using them. I don't know.
Yeah, I was kind of trying to make a joke a little bit about it. Aren't there websites where they're offloading little bits of processing? I forgot the term for it. Like drive-by. They're putting some of that across 1,000 laptops. They're trying to collect that. But yeah, I don't know. GPU. I've never had a customer that needed a GPU, but we do have legit cases for like workstations and VDI. Like if you're doing like, graphics, there used to be cases thinking back 10 years ago where you had to have, I remember speccing servers. This is back when you had to rack things and like pull cables. We had to buy servers with GPUs because the server-side software used the GPU to like render maps. It's all changed now, but yeah, that's not too common anymore.
The coolest use case I saw for GPUs when I was at AWS, and I won't name names here, but was a robotics competition who were using OpenGL for simulated AI robots to get through certain challenges rather than having to physically build the robots. And I thought that is a really, they weren't visualizing anything. They were just running GL code to do like geometry and detection and so on. But anyway, sorry, I took us down our GPU rabbit hole.
But what's interesting about, we have time to keep going? It's not.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought it was 4:30. So good. But what's interesting that I have a point I'm going to try and make about the case you bring up, Josh, is I think a lot of what I end up recommending and doing is sort of like recurring cloud hygiene. Like every time your bill comes in, let's take a look at it. Like, if you're a mega place, you may have a $100,000 AWS account, right? So a $5,000 server kind of gets lost in the wash. But let's take a look at it. And in some cases, there's not, automating things, setting budgets and alerts and things. It may not be the answer. I think an important part that I find myself doing and prescribing is, once a quarter, we're going to sit down for 90 minutes and we're just going to go through the entire environment and we're going to delete stuff that's not in use. Because especially if you get environments where there's a lot of people, big companies, a lot of moving parts, people are afraid to delete things. Just they don't want to break stuff. So a lot of the work we do is just that sort of routine, often manual things. Now, I'm the biggest proponent of automation, or I'm a strong proponent, but there's some things like that where I think you have to realize part of this solution is going to be putting human eyes on things.
Well, it's a proverbial server in the closet that's running, and nobody really knows what it's there for, how long it's been there, but everybody's afraid to unplug it because they don't know, what's gonna come to an end. And that proverbial server in the cloud can be really, really expensive to be running. And if nobody knows what it's actually doing, then you have to ask that question too, is who's keeping an eye on it, who's patching it, who's scanning it for configuration vulnerabilities, that kind of a thing.
I think in some cases, don't be afraid to turn it off and see who gets upset.
Right. So, one area I wanted to get into with you, Dave, is we kind of covered that sort of initial use case. We said it's fits and starts because customers come to you with environments that they need your help to figure out what do I have here? Is it secure? And what do I need to do to bring it into compliance and secure it? But then once you've done that work and you've gotten that environment into a good state, a compliant state, you have to keep it that way. And then that kind of gets into that next sort of, primary use case that you discussed, which is sort of always being aware of the change that is happening to those environments so you can review them and know what's going on, but maybe also identify problems that need to either be explored or remediated. Yeah,
and that's I kind of mentioned it earlier, but once we have an environment that is, it doesn't have to be perfect, but it's at a point now where we want to really start tracking it. That's where we enable what's called a baseline, and that's basically like in the old days of creating like gold images of things, and this is what our server will look like, this is what our cloud will look like, because we want to know if there's changes from it, and kind of in this parlance, an unauthorized or untracked change would be drift. And like I was saying, we're a small team. So tools and processes that allow us to keep aware of things very quickly are very important. And the drift notifications are really important, I mean, partially, but frankly, not as much of a, uh-oh, something's changed, therefore let's go fix it, because it's more about just me being able to quickly digest what's going on, because I'm usually kind of scattered. And knowing whether something should be followed up on, or, it's a valid change. And we get that, like I said, I get an email. We also, depending upon the account, it goes into our ticketing system, and that then forwards to a Slack message. So there's all sorts of different sort of modern communication ways that we get that information, and we don't have to log into the UI. Another scenario that is becoming more popular, which I'm excited about, is the integration of and the use of pre-deployment policy as code. And we've done some chats about that, but basically taking the compliance idea and pushing it as far left on the deployment spectrum as possible, so that and then also supplementing that with Fugue, so that the model we end up with is, and this is true, this is a more mature environment. Usually these are software development environments where there's a lot of change, but it's happening, and we have customers that are doing it. Is, when there's a build or a release of software, especially now that, your cloud is software, right? Everything is software based, and you should be doing IAC. So if you're committed to infrastructure as code IAC, your infrastructure is software, and we want to promote. We big advocate of treating your infrastructure, which is software, just like your other software, and testing it and linting it, and using Open Policy Agent, which is a project that we're supportive of. We learned about from you guys, and you guys are really supporters of. We're able to check and run Terraform scripts, Azure ARM templates, CloudFormation, CDK, things like that, and check against rules, whatever your rule is. Your rule could be tagging based, it could be region based, it could be some NIST reg, and catching that before it's deployed. And then if something gets deployed, having Fugue there to then tell us because people will always make out of band changes, right? So the model, I'm getting long-winded, I'll try and wrap it up. The model I'm talking about is like a pipeline, like a CI pipe, like a Jenkins, like an Azure DevOps code pipeline. But people are always going to log into the console and make changes out of band. And then that's in a lot of cases, the scary part, because there's no way to track it, there's no way to test it. And they're often making them quickly because there's pressure. Hey, I got to access this machine because I got to get this up, open up this port. It's more important to get this working now than to do it right? We all been there. And then what happens is you spend 4 hours fixing that, and then you forget to close the port, and now you have a major issue. And that's where the baseline concept in drift is important, because now I get an email, or our ticketing system gets an alert and creates a ticket to say, hey, someone made a change, good, bad, or indifferent. We want to let you know that something has changed. Go check it out, validate whether it needs to stay or whether it needs to be rolled back. Sorry, that's a long answer.
No, that was good. And actually, so just in the context of office hours, I'm going to just show what you talked about really quickly, just so if there are folks, customers that are watching that aren't doing some of the things that you're doing, because I think you make some awesome points. Just want to show and just highlight some of those things really, really quickly. So I guess the first thing that you were talking about was drift detection and establishing a baseline. So we did an earlier office hours episode. Remember which one it was, but essentially this is, we established a baseline, and it's, again, just a click of a button. Dave doesn't want to, if he doesn't want to interact with the UI, can also do that by the CLI or even our API, an API call. So that can be automated. But once you have that, then you're going to get any changes that are made within that environment. You'll get a drift alert, which will give you details of that. So just in terms of setting that up, if you haven't done that, if you have your Fugue environment set up, you want to go to your notifications. When you create your notification, you can essentially decide to get a configuration drift alert, which is going to tell you anytime something deviates from the baseline that you've established, you get a notification that's here. If changes come in compliance, so if you're checking specific compliance families, a resource goes from compliant to non-compliant, you can get an alert in that regard. One thing to keep in mind, and where we highly encourage either the configuration drift or both of these, is that if a setting is changed and it's still in a compliant state, you're not going to get an alert for that. You will, however, if you have configuration drift. And then auto remediation, if you're doing that, you can get your notifications as well. And this, once you've made those selections, you will create an SNS topic. This will launch directly in the stack. You subscribe to that topic, or ultimately, if you just want to receive emails, you can do it that way. To receive, or once you're receiving the emails, it will come something like this. So you'll get an alert whenever a drift is detected. It will tell you what type of change happened. These were things that were added to the account, and then you'll get notified. And this will also allow you to click directly and just redirect you into the UI. So if you're not baselining, we absolutely encourage it. And that's going to give you, your ability to capture drift within your accounts, to know what changes are being made. And you can always be alerted to it and take action from there.
Can you go back? I just want to make a few comments, Ricardo.
Sure.
Can you go back to sharing? And then, so like what I am frequently doing is, I'm in the email. I go in, but if you go into the drift, so if I'm in the email, there's a link there that takes me to the drift events.
Oh.
And I just want to kind of show the details I'm talking about. Like, go into it, and then
Right account. I had a couple of different Fugue accounts.
it doesn't matter. Just pick one that's got any sort of drift.
Yes.
The more people staring at it, the quicker it goes, right? And then what's cool is, so like, look at the role. The very first one is, if you click on the link, it tells me exactly the pieces that have changed. I think it's color coded, added or changed. And if something is, or was this an ad? Actually, I'm sorry.
I'll go to a modified one.
Yeah, look for a modified, and that's cool too, because it tells me the previous and current.
Yep.
So it's a quick way of like I said, I think what I find most valuable, or where I found that I use it more, but it wasn't an intended purpose, was not just telling me when there's something incompliant being done, just keeping tabs on what's changing is very valuable. And this is true of non-production accounts. I'd say it's almost more true of non-production accounts, because we have more flexibility there for developers and engineers to do stuff. And, we want them to be as unshackled and unfettered as possible and move quick. And we don't expect them to know all the rules of NIST, right? But I'm kind of always keeping an eye on what's going on to know whether I need to go back and jump in. So find it very valuable.
And so you're in part of your job, Dave, is you're kind of keeping an eye on, or like at least overseeing, what a whole number of different developers and engineers are doing in a variety of different cloud environments, right?
Yeah, we have an interesting mix. We're not like I think the term is CSP. We're not like a straight CSP, cloud service provider. Let me just kind of summarize. I'm just thinking out. So I'm thinking of one customer where we built them this cool geospatial app. It's emergency related. But to them, they just get an endpoint, right? But under the hood, there's an AWS account. So, in that case, my group is monitoring that environment while developers are working on it, right? And we have other customers who we're managing their entire cloud account like a traditional CSP. And then I think where we've actually grown more in the last year is being brought in to bigger companies to help them with often security automation work, where they still have engineers who run their account environments, but we're brought in to implement CI to help them get NIST compliant, to et cetera. So it's kind of a whole mix. And that diversity is great to like. I love the flexibility, but it means that we need, it's harder often to put SOPs in place and like, this is how we do this. This is how because we don't have one way of doing it, right? We have every customer is a little bit different. But the parts I care about are, is their cloud environment secure, and is it changing? And yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, I think one of the benefits of cloud is being able to change stuff, right? And so you had mentioned, Dave, like infrastructure as code is a good thing and we should all embrace it. I totally agree with you. And you also said, but people are still going to go to the console. Maybe that's due to time. And by the way, if you're not aware, I know you are, Dave, but if you're in the audience, the console and the CLI are effectively the same. So if you're writing scripts against APIs, you might be viewing that as legit automation. But if you have infrastructure as code which has deployed that infrastructure to begin with, and you're modifying it from some side chain, those are things you need to be able to keep track of. And I think that in my experience, it is generally unrealistic to think that all changes will always be made through IAC, or that is necessarily even desirable. You might even have an application running in cloud that does things like generate new S3 buckets as part of the application code. And so the trick becomes, to my mind, there are two really important factors, or maybe three. One is that the infrastructure as code that's checked into Git is still true. Right? So if you're putting something in IAC, you want it to remain the way that the IAC template has it. And if it needs to change, you should change the IAC template, whether it's Terraform or CloudFormation, so that your IAC reflects what's running in production. Two are, as you've been pointing out more eloquently than I can, keeping track of change and drift, regardless of where it's coming from. Right? So I've talked to folks who are like, well, I'm going to run an IAC inspector, and that will tell me what's happening in my infrastructure. Well, not necessarily, because there are sidechain ways to do that, right? Scripting the CLI, writing a Java program, using the console. And then the third is when you are talking about compliance and policy violation, and why we love OPA, Open Policy Agent, is we can use it and our customers can use it all the way from infrastructure as code through to monitoring the deployed environments. And therefore you have one collection of policies, rather than if you were to use an open source project kind of linter for your Terraform code, and then use another product that has a completely different way of expressing policy as code for your deployed environments. You now have two separate collections of code that are probably never going to agree, first, and second, have to be maintained separately. So again, to me, it comes back to, to us, it comes back to giving engineers the tools they need to do this effectively and easily in a real world environment, not in a hypothetical kind of perfect world.
Yeah, and I just wanted to post that link on there, the GitHub link for Regulo, which is an open source tool we put out there, so you can use OPA to validate Terraform infrastructure as code.
The thing I'm thinking about, and it's probably tangential for this conversation, but is that every environment is a little bit different, and there's really not. I mean, there are some sort of themes or tenets that at least I found to be true. They haven't been proven false yet, or they sort of bubbled up. Like, I mean, in almost all cases, the more IAC, the better. But yeah, it's not a complete thing. And I think thinking about trying to solve the broader security thing, like do everything before deployment, it's not how this works. It's not how it works, because people are going to make changes, but also there are things that in your environment. This might be getting a little off topic, but there are things that just don't make sense often to script out, right? I mean, so I don't know. It's every customer is different, every workflow is different, but it's an interesting thought exercise.
Yeah, I mean, catch as much as you can in the IAC phase, right? Like, definitely do that, but also be aware that don't think you've solved the problem if that's all you're looking at, right? Like, there are lots of other ways for stuff to get into.
And don't assume that because you're using infrastructure as code and CI/CD that's the only way that change is being made to your cloud environment.
Yeah, just an anecdote of a breach from last year I was investigating, where the bad guy got in via some AWS credentials that were stored on a disk image that had been a snapshot that had been backed up to a not that well secured S3 bucket. So they got some creds from the snapshot. And then they got into the account using the creds, and rather than go into the database, the RDS database, they instantiated a new database cluster out of a backup and stole the data out of that. Okay, that's a super cloud native hack, and my hat is off. It's clever because the production database is going to get monitored, right? But spinning up a new database cluster might go unnoticed for some period of time. And that's not going to be covered in any of the IAC templates that created the legit database. But that's where they stole the data from. For all I know, they spun up a new VPC to put it in the VPC to avoid any kind of logging or what have you. And this could have all been done very, very quickly. We don't have enough detail to really recreate like the time sequence and exactly. We don't have like the commands like we did in some other ones, but that's an example of like why you need to be watching stuff that is not in your IAC. Yeah.
It's also, it raised another topic that I have a lot of interest in, although not a lot of solutions, and it's a tough one, is the whole test data management topic and how you sanitize your production data for non-production uses. It's one of these areas where I have a lot of customers that struggle with this.
Oh man, I've struggled with that. I mean, before Fugue and before AWS, I was doing a bunch of national security stuff, and we were working these very, very large data sets. And a lot of the development and testing was around scale of data set. I mean, very large data sets, like, well, these days, probably not, right? These days, data sets are truly huge. I'm talking about a decade ago, but we were getting, 10,000 inserts a second, that kind of thing, which adds up. And like, how do you build mock data for that that's actually going to exercise the application to see if it's going to run in an efficient and effective manner? It's its whole own thing, right? Like that becomes a development project.
Yeah. Well, this is maybe a good time to wrap. Dave, this was awesome. I appreciate you coming on, and as always, thanks for engaging in our office hours and doing our master classes with us. Never fail to learn new things. And it's awesome too that you are totally a power user in like all the core use cases of Fugue, which is kind of getting your cloud compliant, improving it, keeping it that way, and then shifting left. So, and you get the viz, which is awesome. So, thank you. And I doubt this will be the last time. We'll have to have you back on office hours again.
Thank you, Drew, and everyone.
All right, thanks everybody for joining, and we will see you next time on another Fugue Office Hours. Ricardo, Josh, Dave,
take care.
Awesome.
Take care. Bye-bye.